Welcome everyone to today's Target Ed. This is Running Lean Without Running Empty. My name is David Gates, and I'm the Senior Director of Online Education here at Grant Station. Your presenter today is Alice Ruhnke. Alice is the President of Education and Outreach here at Grant Station. And having raised over $45 million from federal, state, and private grant makers, she knows what it takes to get funded. And today she's going to share that expertise with you. So please welcome Alice Ruhnke.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you everyone for being here. Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. Really glad that you're here today. What we're going to be taking some time to talk about today is operations and capacity within your organization and how we can build systems that kind of move us out of that reaction mode and kind of ways to kind of lessen the kind of draining of our energy that happens when we get stuck in that reaction mode. Um, and so some of the specific things that we're going to cover is kind of the reality of what happens with lean organizations, how we get stuck in that reactivity, and what it costs us as an organization. We're going to talk about kind of the differences between being busy and being strategic in what we are applying our energies to, and have a tool for you to use to kind of prioritize those different things that to kind of move from that busy and reactive to more strategic and proactive. We're going to talk about some different systems that you can create to help you kind of move from one to the other. And then we're also going to talk just a little bit about kind of that leadership capacity. You know, a lot of times when we're a small nonprofit, we maybe have started that nonprofit or we tend to start rather small as an organization, and how we can like learn lessons and really kind of delegate some of that work out so that the mission kind of outlasts that initial leadership. So we'll also talk a little bit about some different AI just ideas, kind of a brainstorm of different AI ways you can use AI to help with this different capacity and organization and operations. And then I also have a worksheet that we'll be sending you, and I'll kind of walk through it with you as well today, where you can take those frameworks and take some of these systems that we're talking about and kind of adapt it to meet the needs of your organization and moving from, again, kind of reactive to proactive. So that's what we're going to do today. So it's kind of starting a little different today than usual, but I have four statements up here on the board here. So let's kind of read through these, and in the chat, tell me from 0 to 4, which of these land with you? We're too busy to plan, but too disorganized to stop being busy, right? So really stuck in that busyness. If I don't do it, it won't get done. Okay, I've even said that myself. None of these have are good or bad necessarily, but where do you find yourself in that situation? We say yes to everything, and now we're overwhelmed with the work. Or I haven't taken a real day off or had anything relaxing in months. I'm going to kind of look in here to see. Yeah, so we're getting a lot of different answers, lots of 3s and 4s kind of going early. See a 0 and good for you. That's wonderful. A few, 1s and 2s, which is, in that healthy range. When we start to get up to, those 3s and 4s, things really do get pretty challenging. And one of the things that I want to say, if you're stuck, in these areas, or you're finding yourself saying these things, or just being kind of again in a busy stage versus a strategic stage, that's really not a personality trait. It's not you that's kind of wrong or doing something wrong, I used to always take it as me, what's wrong with me? Why can't I figure out how to get ahead? Right? It's really kind of that small organization growth. It's kind of a trap that we get into, and it's hard to get out of. It's hard to figure out how to, if you're too busy to be proactive, how do you get there? And so I just want to really keep in mind as we go through this that again, it's not you, it's kind of the system, and the process of growing that small organization. And so this isn't something to take personally, it's something that we can really work on with some of the tools that we're going to talk about today. Um, when we kind of are doing everything, when we find that we have too much to do, overwhelm, all those sorts of things, there's a lot of hidden costs to that. The first one is just on your team. When everybody's overwhelmed, then you tend to have that your staff burnout, you burn out, your volunteers burn out. And not only is that burnout kind of negative in a personal way and in other people's lives that you care about, that you're working with and volunteering with, but it's also a financial cost. I was really surprised at this number of it costing 50 to 200% of a salary when you have that turnover. I looked it up in several different places to make sure that was accurate. But that turnover again, not only is it kind of negative on kind of us personally at times, it's also a cost to our organization. So we really want to try to make sure that we're keeping our teams happy and fulfilled in the work that we're doing. It also impacts our programs. A lot of times when we're kind of stuck in busy and we don't have that time to be proactive or plan or look to the future or see what we could do differently, we get stuck in that survival mode, and then we can't really get out of it and kind of invent or create. We don't even have that mental capacity to do that sometimes. And so when you kind of don't have that innovation, a lot of times, again, that leads to burnout, or it also just leads to, that you're just doing anything to keep the lights on, which it doesn't always, but it can lead to that mission creep where, you start to just react to finding money to get in the door to fund your organization. And then you find, you look back and you're like, this isn't even what we wanted to do in the first place. This isn't even true to our mission. And so, but you were trying to just patchwork and do what you could to keep everything moving forward. And then it also can really impact your fundraising as well. There's a lot of systems that we work with when we talk about donors and funders and all those sorts of things. And when we start to let things kind of slip through the cracks, or, thank you notes don't get out, or responses to inquiries don't get made, or, a partnership kind of falls apart, it kind of starts to erode our credibility as an organization. People do start to talk about that. Oh yeah, I gave money to them and, I never heard from them, or, this and that and the other thing. So all of these things, they cost us personally, and then they also kind of cost our programs and our organizations. So I really want to, as we look at the tools today, we're really not talking about, just meaning, oh, well, we'll just cut half of it and then we're fine. It's really about doing what we do well and doing those things, and really doing what we can do instead of trying to do the unsustainable, because we can do the unsustainable for a while, but then that's when things start to fall apart. And a lot of times what they do is they kind of fall apart. We don't say this very often in kind of professional trainings and things, but there's a cost to our organization, then there's a cost to us, as people out working in this really important field of nonprofit work that we do. And it comes home with us.
Carry on.
And so some of the ways that you might kind of see this in your own life is just, that kind of exhaustion that, that sleep doesn't seem to cure, that kind of, even if you get that break, it doesn't seem to cure. You have problems making decisions, like even small things are kind of overwhelming. You start to get that emotional detachment from the people that you serve, or from kind of that mission that really, the reason that this stuff kind of started was because of this connection you had to this mission. And you can start to kind of get that cynicism and resentment towards the people that you serve or the people you work with, um, feeling like whatever you do, it just isn't enough. And then just having those physical symptoms of, not being able to sleep and having headaches and chronic stress. Um, and so, again, these things, if you find them happening to you, again, I just want to say one more time, these aren't character flaws. It's just what happens when, that chronic kind of overload, that's what happens to our nervous systems. And we have that problem with sleep, with decisions, with all those kinds of things. Okay. So let's kind of reframe these a little bit. That if we find that we're in that level of burnout, it's not a sign that you aren't cut out for this work, or again, you're not good enough, like I said earlier. But what we need to do is develop those systems that can help us move out of it. Your mission needs you whole. You if you've flown lately, you'll hear, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. You can't help others when your cup is empty. And so you need to take care of yourself so that you can, strategically take care of the issues that you're dealing with day to day. And then also just, we all kind of lose when we have that burnout of really caring, talented people who get that overwhelm. And that's just a talent that's just kind of gone from our sector when people get kind of that burnout. So again, what we're going to talk today is about those systems to kind of help protect your organization and help protect you personally as well. So just at a glance, kind of looking at this chart, looking at the left-hand side of being busy versus the right-hand side of being strategic, kind of assess last week. And what percent of your time did you spend in kind of the busy of responding to every request, doing things because you've always done them, saying yes to every grant opportunity? I know that that's a big one. That's obviously the field that I've worked in, where people are constantly saying, "Why aren't you applying for this? Oh my gosh, here's something else. You don't know what you're doing." All those sorts of things. And so we tend to say, "Okay, yes, we'll do it. We'll do it," when we really want to be more strategic about what we're saying yes to. How much time are we spending like just covering up the gaps or filling up holes instead of kind of building those systems so that those holes don't exist in the first place? And then, are we looking at our time by measuring what we do or measuring the impact of of what we do? And so I'm going to show you a little tool that will look at where we can really evaluate what we're doing through that mission lens and that impact lens and that return on investment lens, so that when we're saying yes to opportunities, we know that it's going to be the best for our organization to do the work that we do. So, most of the time, even if we're stuck over here in this busy, I mean, we kind of know that. And it's not that we don't know, we kind of know we're there, but how do we get out of it? Right. So the first way that I want to talk about is this kind of 4 filter decision framework. And this is this is like something that I personally have to work on a lot myself, is to not just say yes. That's a little bit of a personality trait of mine, to just say, yes, well, yes, yes, yes. That's a great idea. Let's do it. And to start, not saying yes to every opportunity, not necessarily saying no to every opportunity, but taking the different opportunities and running them through this filter. So your first reaction should never be yes. It should be, let me think about it, right? And give you that pause to be able to start to run these different things through this framework. Um, so, looking at first, is this opportunity something that really, directly advances our mission? Test number one, is it really geared towards advancing what we're, whatever area we're doing in housing and feeding people, in seniors, whatever, work that we do? Is this activity going to help that mission? The second area is looking at revenue. So does this help us generate money to meet that mission? Does it help us protect money that we already have coming in to meet that mission? Or does it position us for revenue in the future? Okay. And so again, looking at that as an impact. The third is capacity. I mean, do we have the people and the times and the systems to do this well? We really want to make sure that we have that capacity. If we don't, I mean, that's probably where, that's where that burnout comes from, that we say yes, and then we can't get the work done, and we start to get burned out, and then, everything else starts to fall. Our organizations start to fall, the people that we serve don't get served, and that sort of thing. So do we have that? Is it available right now to do the work? And then the fourth kind of test is just that strategic alignment. Does it fit where we're trying to go, say, in the next 12 months? If you're in an immediate crisis, you could even look, at that at a smaller kind of, month out kind of thing. Look at it at 6 months. But some of the ways of using this framework is to kind of say, if it doesn't impact our mission, and we don't have the capacity to do it, then we're just going to say no to this opportunity. If it's something that, does impact our mission and it's going to help us get to where we need to go, if it has, 2 to 3 to 4, you can start to kind of decide if you want to move forward with it. But you really want to have, as many of these things as you can, in order, to keep, from that burnout, to keep your missions moving forward. So that's just kind of a tool. Again, I just really, sometimes it has to be like a reaction that we program into ourselves, that we don't say yes. I mean, we don't have to say no right off the bat either, but that we just don't say yes to any request until we've just paused and started to think about this activity and what it has to do, to help our organizations. Even as in a for-profit organization, we do this, similarly at Grand Station, of really looking at, will this help us? Will it make our mission? Will it impact our revenue? Can we do it? Do we have the staff to do it? And then is it aligned with where we want to go? So we constantly filter everything through these things. So, from a nonprofit perspective to a for-profit perspective, these are really good filters to start to think through. As we're kind of, looking to develop these systems, some different things that you can, look at, some communication issues. These are, again, just kind of big ones that really impact the nonprofit. But, how are we communicating? Are we sharing calendars and information in a way that, people aren't duplicating work or double scheduling things? Do people kind of know what to expect? What are the expectations you have for them? What do they need to maybe create to communicate back to the staff or the team? What's that, kind of standing thing that they can prepare for every week? With the different meetings you have and communication standards that you have. And then even just response time expectations, is everything an emergency or not? And so a lot of times with my staff, most of the time when I ask for something, people do it right away, which is great, right? But sometimes I'm like, this is not a hurry. This is not a hurry. Just, the next time you get a chance, get this to me, but I'm not, requiring you that this is something that you have to do right now. And so we, just kind of set that up. And so again, you'll figure out, does that have to be a set cadence or whatever, but really, working with your staff to know, and your board and those kinds of things. When is it an emergency, and when, is it really not an emergency? Because sometimes people really get stuck in that emergency, and not everything's an emergency. The second part is just looking at some of your standing operating procedures of having like the things that you do written down, so that if you were able to expand to onboarding new staff or new volunteers to help lessen some of the load, are some of the things that you've already set up a system to do it, but it's not written down, it's in somebody's head. Are these things kind of written down in a simple way for other people to be able to learn from? Bringing, other people on as you bring on new board members, are you starting over every time because you're not kind of keeping a simple checklist of everything that you need to do, or with, staff and volunteers. And then also just keeping, a shared drive where everybody can get access to, important documents. And so, more than ever, organizations are, remote, and people are working in different places and all those sorts of things. When I was a consultant, I worked, by myself with one or two consultants, and I kind of kept everything myself and sent information to them as they needed it. But as organizations grow, as people start to not work physically together anymore, having those shared drives where this information is there, just go get it when you need it, really can help save time. Looking at, I'm going to go to institutional knowledge real quick and then come back to grant seeking and development. But really with that knowledge of just, again, it kind of goes with some of those standard operating procedures. How do you do this? How do you accept a donation? Is this written down? Can everybody on the staff kind of get access to this? And here's kind of an annual what I know handoff notes, kind of a maybe politically incorrect way of saying that too. We kind of have within our organization, somebody gets hit by a bus, file, like, so that, like, do I know what David does, so that, of course, we don't want to ever get hit by a bus, but we, refer to that as a kind of being funny, but it's not funny. But anyway, having those things written down, and we look at those things, on an annual basis, because things change a lot and the work we do changes and how we do it. So keeping those things really, up to date, as to how people implement their jobs, just really important, because you don't want it just sitting in certain people's heads. Because if that person, left your organization, if that person, moved on to another place, this or that, if they didn't write that down, you got to start from scratch and rebuild that. And that takes a lot of time and energy away from, growing your organization again and being proactive. When we're looking at that grant seeking and grant development, of course, this is where, Grant Station works a lot, obviously. And so do you kind of have that prospect list kind of always searching for new funding opportunities? And then having kind of that analysis that you do, a simple analysis on what is your return on your investment for these different opportunities, and kind of putting each funding opportunity through this kind of test, if you will. And we call it a decision matrix of, is this one that really helps us, will really, move us along, or is it, something that maybe we're not very competitive for, it's too much time, not enough money to help us move forward. Having any of that kind of information that is reusable is, a lot of grants, the information from one grant to another grant, you can use and repurpose that information. And so, having those banks of information, again, keeping them on shared drives where people can come and pull from your organizational background section or your program section and pull information again, instead of having to start from scratch every time they're reaching out to a donor or writing a new grant or something like that. And then having that kind of tracker of when things need to be done and when, so that everyone's accountable for what they have to do. I want to share with you one other tool that we have at GrantStation. That's free if you're a member or not a member, and it has to do with grant seeking. So you can go to grantstation.com and go to public resources, and you can go to the state of grant seeking, and I'm going to go to the benchmarker tool. And so the state of grant seeking is a survey that we do every year with nonprofit organizations to see what the last year was like in grant seeking. And so what this tool allows you to do is to answer two simple questions of what your annual budget is and then what your mission focus is. And you just click on those two things. And then you can look and compare your organization, the annual budget range of your organization or the mission focus of your organization, and find out how many, what percentage of their funding is coming from grants, what percentage are reoccurring grants, where do they get funding from, how many grants did they write applications for, how many grants did they get. And so it's just a tool to help you benchmark yourself against other like organizations, because just because we're in the same nonprofit space doesn't mean, a small animal welfare organization with a $50,000 budget, how they're seeking grants is going to look really different from a, substance abuse counseling program that has a $1 million budget, right? You can't expect that you would be doing the same things. So what this allows you to do is kind of benchmark yourself. Again, it looks at, what your capacity is and compares it to other like organizations to kind of help you set, where should we be looking for funding? Where are people being successful? How many should we be applying for? All those sorts of things. So it's just a free tool. All you have to do is, like I said, click on those two buttons and it'll give you a report where you can then take that to your development team. You can take it to your board of directors, really start to look at kind of your revenue when, at how you're seeking your grants and that sort of thing, so that just again, you're comparing yourself to like organizations. So this is kind of the last larger thing that we're going to talk about, but kind of again, when we are looking at small organizations, a lot of times, that founder is the person that, has developed the organization. They've done it on their own sweat and tears. They've been there, they've been working really hard. There's times when they didn't think they were going to survive and all those sorts of things. And what founders do really matter, really important. However, we also, if we're in that stage, in that founder stage, we also have to realize that the organization needs more than one person. And so it's time to start expanding that out to other people. And so some of the things that you might see, are just, one person's in charge of everything. You can't make any decisions without that person's, permission. The board just says, yep, we'll just do whatever the executive director says, that, she's the one that started the organization. We're not trying to help lead or guide the organization. People are like, I can't do anything. This place will fall apart if I'm not here. And so how can we, again, move that along and kind of reframe that? Again, that what the founders do is very important, but how do we then keep this, going into the future? So kind of that delegation is really important. to, find, staff or volunteers to start to bring into the process. Looking at using volunteers strategically, providing them with, not maybe just kind of task oriented things, but helping you, with that mission that you're trying to advance. And then also just looking at anything that you're doing to, cross train people. Again, keeping those logs that I was talking about of what people do, and the standard operating procedures of how things happen. Keeping these things written down, again, they will change over time. It's not that that means that we have to stay static and keep the same. But it allows us not to have to reinvent the wheel every time, and really always looking kind of outwards to how can I take what's in, what I know, what I've developed, and help other people, embrace this and carry it out as well. So I think that, again, founder syndrome isn't a bad thing, but when we don't think past the founder, then a lot of times that's when organizations do, kind of fall flat, because it was one person's vision and it wasn't shared with other people, and other people brought into it, again, strategically, right? And so sometimes they just kind of fall after that founder leaves. So just a couple of things, as we look at some different ways that AI can kind of help us, with kind of our operations. Looking at just, here's just some different prompts that you can use of, a simple standard operating procedure for accepting donations. Or, write me a simple 5-step operating procedure for, managing checks and, managing donations, those kinds of things. Again, you'll find we put information in there. It's not going to be exactly exactly your answer, but wow, it's going to get you started. It's going to get that standard operating procedure, halfway written just by using the prompt. And then you can, use your information, make it yours. Looking at meeting agendas or anything that's kind of reoccurring for that, of just, can you help me create this? I think a lot about job descriptions and things like that we spend a lot of time writing and things. So things that can be, kind of, again, kind of help pre-written for us that we can then model to our organization. Asking it to have different email templates or newsletter templates that you might have. Having you kind of identify where to start, stop, and continue. That's on one of the sheets that I'm going to provide to you. Kind of a process that you can modify as well. But, looking for AI to kind of help you maybe decide on some of those, or give you, brainstorming on things that maybe you could, start doing that you've not done, or things that maybe don't have that impact that you can stop doing. And then just even, I always like to take AI tools and just ask it, what don't I know, right? Like, what should I be asking? What kind of operational capacity should a small nonprofit with a budget of XYZ have? What should I have online, or available? What kinds of policies, what kind of procedures, those kinds of things should I have? You can also work with your nonprofit associations in your state who can really help you with that as well. Figuring out what you need legally, kind of first, and then what some of those best practices are after that. So just using AI, I think, can be a nice way to help the lean nonprofit, kind of level that playing field and increase their capacity, to be, to increase their operations and their organizations. So the next thing I'm going to share with you is a tool that we will send out, and you can modify this as it fits your organization, but it has the start, stop, or continue assessment. So that's where we're kind of starting of, making sure that we're looking at everything through that mission and capacity lens, right? So obviously having your mission, and then looking at what you're doing, kind of determining, is it working? Is it not working? And filtering it through those four things of mission impact, revenue impact, capacity, and strategic alignment, and really looking at what you are currently doing and making sure that those activities kind of need to be happening to advance your mission. Because sometimes some of the things you're doing, you might just be doing because you've always done them, but they might not be the best things for you to be doing. Also then looking at, what are some of those things that you could start doing? What those benefits are, what's the first step? So we're looking a lot here at, we don't have to do it all and, really fast, but what are just these steps to get us out of reactivity? And then what's, working well that we have to continue doing, and why we need to protect that. And so again, that can be from those four lenses as well for mission, revenue, alignment. Um, the second part is just, oops, sorry, let me go down here. The second part is just the scale that looks at at those four different capacity areas of communication and coordination. You know, these are just ideas of things that you can do, but where are you? Are on, like a scale of 1 to 5 in these different areas, and what's a gap that you have? And you can look again at your operating procedures, at your grant seeking, and then, sorry, I don't know why these are, um, and then that institutional knowledge, and then, then just start with one. You don't have to overwhelm yourself. You're already overwhelmed, right? That's why you're here today. So we can look at the first one. We can look at our biggest gap is in that communication. We're repeating all sorts of work because we're not sharing information. Okay, that's one thing that we're going to fix. And we work on that. And then we can kind of come back to these sheets. We can come back and do a second one. Then another kind of final roadmap that you can take, again, looking at the things, what is it that then you want to do? And looking at, what do you need to get that done? So whatever that gap is, what's the solution? How is it going to help you? And again, what are kind of your targets to make sure those happen? So this is just something that, you'll want to take and modify to, match your own needs, but it will help you kind of take through these different areas, take the frameworks, take kind of being more strategic in the different areas and being able to start to address those issues, and start to move out of reaction and into kind of proactive work that you want to do that's going to really advance what you do. So I'm going to come back to this. David had mentioned at the beginning, this is the first of we have a quarterly Target Ed series. So this one is all about the small, lean nonprofit. We're starting here today with burnout, and then we're going to look again, very geared at small organizations about fundraising strategies, about grants, about marketing and communications, about budgeting, and then kind of the sustainability aspects. So we do those, basically about every other week, and you can join one if you want. You can join all of them if you'd like. They can be taken independently or as a whole group. So whatever your organization needs. So with that, I think I'm going to stop and see what questions we have.
Awesome. Thank you, Alice. As a reminder, if you do have any questions for Alice, hop over to the Q&A and enter them there. We've had a couple come in so far. Cindy says, we're not yet actively fundraising. Does that affect our decision matrix other than thinking ahead about potential impact on revenue?
Yeah. So when you are looking, so the term that I was using, decision matrix, that's what I was using when you're looking at different funding opportunities and you're trying to decide, I'm looking at XYZ foundation or my community foundation, should I apply? And then the decision matrix kind of helps you decide, yes, this would be this one is the best return on our investment versus any other one. So I think that, you your decision matrix will really look at each funding opportunity individually and assess your organization's capacity. Okay, the four-part filter. Okay, sorry. Okay, I understand now. So actually what she meant was the four-part filter if you're not fundraising. And yes, I think the four-part filter goes for anything. It goes for somebody that says, hey, do you want to be a partner in this? Hey, do you want to join this with our organization? Hey, here's an opportunity to be a part of this. Like anything can be run through that because a lot of times we're spending, a lot of time or energy on things that might not give us our best return on investment of our time and our capacity. So I think anything that you're looking at, you would want to run not just funding decisions, but partnerships, bringing on new programs, all those kinds of things. Looking at everything through those four lenses.
Great. Catherine says for a $1.5 million nonprofit organization, how many staff or how much staff time is a good benchmark for a grant writer?
Yeah, that's interesting. Catherine, I would have to say I would look it is in the benchmarker tool that we do have like by size of organization and then how many staff is dedicated towards development work. So you could look at that size and then look at that question and see what other organizations in your budget range, what they have. And then that would just be good data for you to kind of, move forward with, any decisions that would have to be made from
Mhm.
there.
Great.
Yeah.
How can you make the case to your ED or board to hire more staff for fundraising support?
I think with that one, it's really about the data. It's really about using, data and information that you have about, again, going to the benchmarker would be a great tool for that because it's information that is like against, organizations, nonprofit organizations all across the US and Canada. And it's, real, detailed information about what other people are doing and where their success is. And so I think, kind of, I would do that report first because taking that and showing that, organizations our size that, apply for 5 grants usually receive 3 or whatever. And then you can extrapolate, kind of from there, what that, financial return on investment might be. So I think, using that with your fundraising will really be helpful for you. And like I said, that you can use, anybody can use that tool if they're a member of GrantStation or not.
Great. And this question came earlier when you were talking about the decision matrix. Can you talk a little bit about how you determine which grants are worth the effort?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that you kind of want to think about. First is just again kind of that alignment with your mission. Looking at things like your own organizational capacity. Do you have the capacity, the time and energy of what it takes to fill out the application? There's things like, do we have a relationship with the funder? Do we have that would when you have that relationship, you want to kind of prioritize those higher. There's different criteria on, do you have, the matching funds that might be necessary. There's lots of different things to think of. And if you are already a GrantStation member, within your own dashboard, you have a decision matrix that you can use to evaluate each funding opportunity. So if you already are a member, that's a tool that's built into our services right there. Other than that, you can just, kind of learn about, how other organizations might do it. They might do it on a spreadsheet or an Excel, those kinds of things. But it's really about what are those critical factors for your organization? How aligned are you with the funder? And then, you can add um, your special criteria from there that's specific to your organization.
Great. Laura says, when considering grant writing plus organizational longevity, is legal counsel encouraged, especially if your organization is expanding? I ask this from a place of understanding systems and how they affect organizational access or reach.
Hmm, that's kind of interesting. I think that, I have not been that involved with legal counsel, or even adjacent to that as a grant professional. Sometimes I say more, yeah, online with like a CPA, more than legal counsel. Um, because you want to make sure that you're tracking your information appropriately and that you're, using your budget appropriately and staying uh, aligned with all of the funders, expectations of your finances. Usually it doesn't have as much to do legally. So I would say more you want to align with your finance people and making sure, especially if you're getting any government funding, but even if you're, not getting government funding, you want to make sure that you're doing everything financially the way that you're supposed to be and keeping track of records appropriately and all those sorts of things, because that can really hurt a nonprofit, if they get caught or if something bad happens. So that's where I would put put my energy.
Right. Emily says, I'm trying to fit my volunteer board members to the roles for which they seem suited, and in which they are the most interested. However, sometimes what they're most interested in doing, more programming, are not the most urgent needs. Are there any specific strategies I can use to
Ooh.
communicate that would get them to think more strategically about
Hmm.
the organization?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Emily. I mean, I think I just kind of think of the word when you say that, the word like capacity building to me is like maybe looking at more of what your organization is needing. Because you're saying that most people are interested in doing programming, which is really important. But if you're looking at people to help, help you write grants or help you recruit volunteers or do marketing and those kinds of things, to me that's capacity building. So sometimes it might be a bit of an education process of kind of sharing with them kind of all that needs to happen in order for that programming to happen effectively. And see if you can, and sharing that information in, kind of that fun way. I'm glad that you're really, looking at them individually and saying, what do they like to do? Because that's what's going to make it work. So I think if you can, kind of have different capacity areas that you want to increase, and then kind of talk with people about those areas and see if you can get any interest from there.
Great. Marcia says, how do you build relationships with funders?
Yeah, that's, we have do lots of webinars on that. It really is about reaching out to the funders, really, at first doing your homework, knowing who they are, knowing how you're aligned with them or how you anticipate being aligned with them. And then reaching out and starting that conversation. Some funders you really can't reach out to, they don't want to talk to you, but a lot of them do. And especially if you're new in the game, your local community foundations, your United Ways, your small businesses, those groups are going to be, more kind of community oriented and want to talk with you and have those conversations. So always approach them with the solutions that you provide, not what your needs are. So always kind of talking about what you're bringing to the table, what problems you're solving, those sorts of things, and starting to find the alignment between them and you.
Great. Bethany says, how do you go about decentralizing processes from founder syndrome when that person does so much? And particularly if that person doesn't like the idea of being decentralized or
I
having
know that is very challenging. I've worked with a lot of executive directors that don't want to let go, and it's really tough. because you might even have a lot of great board members or volunteers who, have caught on to the vision and mission of this organization, and that person just can't let it go. Um, so, I don't know that I really have a complete answer for that, except for maybe helping them see that how important this mission is and this vision that they've had, and really sharing with them, if this isn't expanded, it will end when you stop doing the work, and doing that in a nice way, of course, and that sort of thing. But um, that's a hard one. But I think if you can really get it through, into their, kind of knowledge base, that, if they don't start to share this information, then it will stop when they stop working. And they don't want that to happen, and try to make it as easy for them as possible. But sometimes it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it's impossible. But, there's always things you can try.
Mm-hmm. Great. Debbie says, we are a small working volunteer board. We are in the process of growing without funding to hire staff. How do we keep from burning out?
Oh, that's a good one too. Wow, yeah, that's hard. I think that, again, keeping things realistic in what you can do. Again, when we talk about those four things, that capacity one is very important. So, I was on a literacy organization, and it was an all volunteer board. And it was like there were things that would come up that was like, well, it was an adult literacy, and then things would come in about like children's literacy. And I would often talk in the meetings like, listen, we don't have enough to fulfill the adult literacy stuff. We just don't have the capacity to do the child stuff. Even though sometimes there was money out there for it, I was like, even if we got more money for it, we don't have the capacity. So I think it is, just making sure that the things that, that you're doing, if, focusing in on those things that you do well, that are going to kind of move the needle for your organization. And, sometimes there's going to be opportunities that you just can't take, which is hard, unless you get more volunteers to support that.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. I think we have time for one more question. Nabil says, you talked a lot about prioritization. How does one match the need to wear multiple hats in a lean organization versus work that is consistently outside a person's job description? Where does one prioritize this on an individual level versus an organizational level when the systems don't exist?
Okay, how does one match the need to wear multiple hats versus work that are consistently outside of the person? Yeah, again, I think that's like an honest assessment of job capacity. That that if you're doing things that aren't part of your job, and that's leading to burnout, I think that people need to have that honest discussion. And again, sometimes it's like, well, maybe something really doesn't happen. Maybe this partnership with this new organization just doesn't happen because we can't do it. We're already stretched too thin. And so again, those are hard decisions to make, but it's harder to burn everybody out, and then you don't have anybody working on the mission. Right. So I think sometimes having those really honest, what do we have the ability to do? What don't we? And what do we have to put to the side, is just that hard conversation that we have to have
Mhm.
sometimes.
Great. Awesome. That looks like all the questions we have for today. If something does pop up, you can always reach out to us at info@grantstation.com and we will get an answer for you. Just a few last reminders. This is the first webinar in this new 6-part series. You can still join for the discounted rate of $175. I will drop a link for that in the chat. The feedback form is going to pop up as you exit the webinar. Please take a moment to let us know what you think. We do read and share all of your feedback to ensure we continue to deliver the best content possible. And one last reminder, we're going to provide you with a link to the slides, the handouts Alice referenced, and the webinar recording. These will arrive to your webinar registration email on Wednesday evening. That's everything I have, Alice. I want to say thanks one more time for sharing your expertise. Any final thoughts before we go?
just, would like to say the work that you all do is so important and it is so hard and challenging. And so I really want to thank you for the work that you do, and really want to encourage you to protect yourselves and your organizations so that you can continue to do it into the future. I know it's not easy, but it's something that we really have to, especially, now is a very challenging time for the sector. And so I think it's a good time to really look at what we can do and what we can do well and make those decisions from there. So I appreciate everything that you all do. And we hope to see you on another Grand Station webinar.
Visit GrandStation to see our latest online education offerings in the form of live webinars, interactive workshops, and on-demand learning. GrandStation.com.